Ladies and gentlemen, as Bob wrote the remarks for our first inductee, he had to do it several times. This was not only his boss for the last 28 years, but his best friend as well. The world lost the finest human being on the planet when Rick Kiser passed away this year, but Rick would not want this induction to be a somber occasion. He would rather see you laugh at his antics rather than listen to his life's accomplishments. So we'll give you a little mix. As a freshman at JMU, Rick took a class in archery from Margaret Horn. Being very athletic, Rick picked it up quick and fell in love with the sport. Mrs. Horn asked him to try out for the team, which worked out well for both of them, as he earned All-American honors in 1977, 1978, and 1979. Of course he was good at shooting sports. His brother Terry tells the story of a 16-year-old Rick showing a 6-year-old Terry who's standing on the toilet in the bathroom exactly how to shoot a squirrel with his new .22 rifle. Rick said, "You put the crosshairs on the squirrel and gently squeeze the trigger." Next was the bang of the .22, the sound of a broken bathroom window, and the chaos of two kids trying to disappear. JMU hosted college nationals in 1977, and when we came up with some activities, we were trying to keep them busy when they weren't shooting. Things like arrow chucking, arrow darts, and the speed round were introduced. And the speed round, whoever could shoot 3 scoring arrows at 30 meters the quickest would win. Rick won that round with a time of 12.5 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, just go home and try that. We also had games and activities at night. Rick had built a small track on a sheet of plywood, gone to the mountains, and caught some salamanders, and we advertised it as the Newt Races. It sounded like a novel idea, and everybody wanted to see him run. But we hadn't taken into account that beer was legal on campus at that time, and the drinking age was 18. Kegs were everywhere. Practice went well, and it was fun watching the salamanders being encouraged to run the track, until one of the guys watching spilled beer on the track. Well, we discovered that the damp track made the Newts run funny briefly, and then they quit. Unlike the college students that were watching the salamanders had not built up their tolerance of beer. Game over. During Rick's time at JMU, we also had an opportunity to perform at a halftime at a JMU men's basketball game at Godwin Hall. Wow, that's big time. So Mrs. Horn asked Rick to come up with the demonstration. Rick thought he would ask Bob to come back as a ringer to do a special shot at the end, and the two of them worked up the show. We started shooting balloons, to big applause. Then hidden balloons, where one balloon is inside of another, also to big applause. And then we got a volunteer from the audience, a professor. He came up, he sat him down in a chair, and they put an apple on his head. And then we asked him if he minded if we took one practice shot. So we put an apple on a styrofoam head, and Rick proceeds to shoot that head right between the eyes. And the volunteer then ran back up into the stands trying to get away from us, to enormous applause. Then Bob came out for the big finale. They lit a candle 15 meters away from the shooting line, turned the lights out in the gym, and Bob shot out the candle with his first arrow. Again, enormous applause. Then they turned the lights back on. The teams tried to take the court. But do you know how long it takes for Mercury lights to come back on? JMU Archery was never invited to do another halftime show. One more archery antic from JMU. Fellow archery alumni Ray Stone got a project approved by one of his kinesiology instructors at JMU. The paper he was writing was entitled "The Effects of Alcohol on the Tournament Archer." Rick and Bob quickly volunteered to be two of the subjects in the study, which involved shooting and scoring one end before drinking, then drinking a beer, shooting and scoring another end, repeat. Well, you get the idea. The result of the study showed that the first 2 beers helped the archer to perform better. But for some reason, each additional beer seemed to result in a decay of the skill of the archer. However, As a side note, the archers didn't seem to mind. Rick also had a need for speed all of his life, and as a young buck was miraculously able to survive a rollover in a Spitfire somehow, ending up with his head under the dashboard. He later owned and raced Porsches at the same track in Virginia that Paul Newman made famous years earlier. After spending time learning from professional race drivers, Rick was actually paid as a driving instructor for aspiring young sports car racer. Somehow, Rick had the time to fall in love with a hot cheerleader from Bridgewater, get married, and raise 2 kids in the middle of all this. He ran a very popular archery shop called Buckhorn Archery while working construction. At one time, he was the sole importer of Beeman carbon arrow shafts from France and R10 archery products from Scotland. He found great humor in importing the shafts from France, building them, and shipping finished arrows back to mail-order customers in France. He also built one of the most successful construction companies in the area, constantly involved at JMU and regularly serving VMI, Washington & Lee, UVA, Bridgewater College, and community colleges from Northern Virginia to Roanoke, along with manufacturing companies and processing plants throughout the region. Rick was a kind and generous man who served as an inspiration to all who were fortunate enough to have met him. He was a great friend to JMU Archery throughout his life. And as a gesture to honor Rick and his love of JMU athletics in general and JMU Archery specifically, his wife, Libby Kiser, has donated over $100,000 to establish the Rick Kiser Endowment for JMU Archery. Ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge the accomplishments and contributions of our newest member of the JMU Archery Hall of Fame, Rick Kiser.